My name is Stuart Stedman, and it's my pleasure to begin our conference with a panel discussion about the more practical aspects of your role as members of governing boards. I attended this conference last year, and I found this particularly helpful, and I think you will too. Our panel today is Carolyn Johnson, Chair of the Board of Regents of Brazosport College, Michael Lewis, Member of the Board of Regents of Texas Tech University System, and Mike Reeser, Chancellor, Texas State Technical College System. Based on their personal experience, these distinguished individuals are going to share with us what they wish they had known as new governing board members. In the case of Chancellor Reeser, what he wishes new governing board members would have known. So let me give you a brief biography of each person, although there's more stuff on your flash drive and in your materials. Carolyn Johnson is a lifetime resident of Brazosport, born in Palacios, Texas, and she moved to Brazosport's Freeport community as a baby, and she joined Brazosport College Board of Regents in November 1998 and was elected chairman of the Board of Regents in 2012. She was appointed by Governor Rick Perry to the Brazos River Authority's Board of Directors, where she served as chairperson of the Executive Committee. She's also vice president of the Board of Employment for the Physically Disabled, Inc., chairperson of the Lanier Alumni Association, and former member of the Board of Directors of Memorial Child Care Center. Professionally, Regent Johnson began working at the Dow Chemical Company Oyster Creek Division as a chemist in January 1972, and she retired from Dow Chemical in March 2006. Regent Johnson attended Lamar University, graduating with a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a minor in German. Michael Lewis is a sixth-generation Texan who grew up in Olney. He was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the Board of Regents of the Texas Tech University System on January 31st, 2017. He currently serves as chairman of the Carr Foundation Board of Trustees. He's also a member of the Finance Administration Committee, the Investment Advisory Committee, and the Investment Advisory Committee of the Texas Tech University Endowment. He's also served as board member of the Texas Tech Foundation. He was named Distinguished Alumnus of the Rawls College of Business in 2014. Professionally, Regent Lewis started a series of private partnerships based in Dallas to acquire oil and gas interests in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. He served as Chief Executive Officer at Columbus Realty Trust Chief Executive and Executive Officer at Columbus Realty Trust and at Dean Foods Corporation. He spent 19 years serving in various executive positions at Southland Life Insurance Company and Southland Financial Corporation while residing in Dallas. Regent Lewis graduated from Texas Tech University with a bachelor's degree in finance and a minor in chemistry. He graduated from Southern Methodist University with a master's degree in business administration. Mike Reeser is Chancellor and CEO of the Texas State Technical College System, where he heads the only state-supported technical college system in Texas. Under Chancellor Reeser's leadership, the Texas State Technical College System has become well known as an innovator in higher education, with the most noteworthy being the return value funding formula, a wholly outcomes-based approach to state funding. Prior to being appointed Chancellor in 2010, Mike served Texas State Technical College System in various roles, including Chief Financial Officer, College President, Vice President, and Dean of Instruction. In the early half of his career, Chancellor Reeser was a banker and served in executive and management roles in Waco and in Houston. Chancellor Reeser holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Texas A&M University and a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Texas at Arlington. Please help me welcome our panel today. So the procedure, Ms. Johnson will speak first, Mr. Lewis, and then Chancellor Reeser, and then if we have any time for questions, we'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stedman. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you here today, and I would like to thank you for inviting me to join in this panel. I have been a member of our Board of Regents for 19 years, having become a member of the board in 1998 for Brazosport College. And I'm also going to talk about what new board members I wish would have known when they come on the board. And so way back in 1998 was a long time ago. So I really don't remember a lot about what happened that first year. So I asked one of my colleagues, a board member who had been on the board about 3 years, to help me with this relatively new board member, what she wished she had known when she got on there. My colleague is a medical doctor. She's formerly a chemist working at a large chemical company, and she's a really sharp lady. And her reply to me was, I wish I had known the tremendous amount of reading that's required when you become. And you all know that's true because we have so many rules, we have so many policies, we have so many requirements that we must all familiarize ourselves with. You do have to bring out your reading glasses and do that reading. But let me tell you, even though she had to do all her reading, this did not discourage her from being a wonderful board member. And I want you to know that you should not let it discourage you either. Get in there, dig in, read, and be ready when it's time to have your meetings. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I wish all regents and trustees would know. And first, it is understand that an individual board member has no authority. By yourself, you're just an individual, no authority over the board. As a board member, there should be no hidden agendas and no person should steer all the decisions in their direction. This number one concept is that the board as a whole is the decision-making body. If you can keep that in mind, that'll keep you out of a lot of trouble. Next, the board governs by policy and has only one employee, and that's our president. In my case, my president's sitting right there. The college president is the only employee that the board has. If you have a question for a staff or a question that you don't understand, don't go to staff. Go to the president who will interface with the staff, get your questions answered, or call that staff member in to consult. And then the president is the person who will interface with the employee, not the board. Get that in your mind, not the board, the president. The next one is, as discussed earlier, preparation for board meetings requires time, lots of reading, lots of prep time, understanding the vocabulary or the terminology of higher education. It's almost like learning a new language. So you really do have to study. As chair, I'm very concerned with the best use of time at our meetings. I have a lawyer that really doesn't like you to give a whole bunch of extraneous information. They want you to go straight ahead, get it done, do our discussions, and then we're over, we're finished. So I can tell you that we encourage questions for clarification, just not unnecessary questions. Now, unnecessary questions, what's an unnecessary question? Because some people say there's no silly questions. Well, that's true, there are no silly questions, but sometimes question will let you get an idea whether people have prepared. For example, when the board member says, well, on this bid, did we get 3 bids? Did we take the lowest bid? And guess what? There was a letter in the board package, and the packet says from the financial officer, all of that information in the first 3 sentences. So it's a real key that they did not read the board agenda packet. So you don't want to be that person that does that. Another important concept is understanding the board's philosophy for dealing with complaints or responding to questions from the media. Our board refers community and student concerns directly to the president for investigation and for resolution. We do not become the investigators. That's not our thing to do. We have to be governors. We are governance. That's all we are too, not investigators. Now, how about dealing with media? Because you know, the media will come up to you at a real inopportune time and ask you a question. And we direct all of the board of those kind of questions to the chair, that's me, or the president. And we have the support of our college's public information office. It's really not a good thing for you to fall into the trap of just shooting right off the top of your head, going off of your cuff, and then you say the wrong thing, and you didn't understand the question, and you have something in the paper that you wouldn't want to read. So try to go back to your president, go back to your communications people, and let them handle that media interface if you can. I also wanted to talk a little bit about relations among governing board members and senior administrators. At Brazosport College, our board consists of 9 regents, 4 men, 4 women, and 5 men, 3 Hispanics, 2 African Americans, and 4 Caucasians. Our professions include a banker, a lawyer, a retired chemist, small business owner, an engineer, a retired human resources manager, a large company retired comptroller, a pastor of a church, and a credit union vice president, and a doctor. So you see, we have a wide range of professions, diversity of ethnicity, and a balance of gender. And what's the commonality? The commonality is that the board works together as a team for the good of the college and the success of students. There are no special interests among board members for partisan gain. That's really important, to keep your board balanced and working together. You just really can't afford to have someone with an inside agenda, a hidden agenda. You just can't do it. I was going to talk a little bit about our planning process. I know I'm getting close to 5 minutes, so I don't want to keep you, but let me say that we do have a planning process. We have an annual workshop. We look at completing milestones. In this case, it's Vision 2020. We're getting ready to do Vision 2025. And that is something that will allow the administrators, as well as the president, as well as the board, to get together and work out, what are we going to do for the next year? What are we planning for the next 5 years? That's a good thing to do. It keeps everybody on the same page. I can tell you again that as a board, you need to evaluate yourself. And we have several areas that we look at, like preparing to participate responsibly. That's taking care of your agenda, knowing what's going to happen. Also, commit to responsible stewardship. You got to be a caretaker of the college. And then relations with external constituencies. That's a good thing, because you got to be knowledgeable of your community and what are the educational, social, as well as economic and environmental needs of your community. That's what if you're a community college, that's what you're there to help with. So that's a good thing. And then the last one I would like to say is that what's going to happen, we evaluate our president in an open session, all the board members present. We talk to her about her responsibilities, her goals, her strategies, and we do it openly. So she knows what we think, and we know what she thinks. That's a good deal. So what happens when you do all of this evaluating? Because we do quite a bit evaluating. There's a positive impact that makes clear expectations. There's nothing hidden. People know that clearly it's expectation. And more importantly, the greater communications among the regions themselves, and it also allows greater communication between the board and the CEO. And I think I better stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Michael?
Good morning again, and thank you. I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum, in a sense, from Ms. Johnson, that I've only been a regent now for 10 months, and she's been 19 years. So I hope we listen closely to her. That said, a common denominator of regents is typically the people are probably type A people. You had to seek to be appointed by the governor, or at least you had to make the application. So that's the basic personality type that, for the most part, that you're going to have in common and get from a board political situation, et cetera. And Texas Tech does not really have a formal program to train regents. There's not a tutorial in place. Certainly we would read through most of the regents' rules, and it was almost on-the-job training and learning by doing. So what would I wish I had known now? Maybe I'm too new into it to really quite answer that. But nevertheless, without the tutorial, some would say, don't get down in the weeds and focus on policy, goals, and strategy. I would say that I've done that, yes and no. In other words, I have, as a finance guy, which means that I'm precise and I'm detailed and pretty granular. So I actually do read the material and ask questions, and every now and then make a correction in what I see. But when I make a correction, I make a copy of it, tear the page out, handwrite it, fold it up, and lay it on the person's desk. And nobody gets called out. I'm not in a position to sit there and try to embarrass someone or anything else. But what I did do, I took the initiative first to visit each campus and facility that we have. And so obviously I was familiar with the Lubbock campus because I'd gone to school there, but also the med school, the Health Science Center. I went to El Paso. I went to San Angelo. I went to Abilene. I went to Dallas. I live in Dallas. I went to Amarillo. And I conscientiously made a decision to meet the people and understand visually what was in each one of those locations, so that when I was asked a question about it, which we have in one stage or the other approximately $600 million worth of construction in one form or the other underway. And so I wanted to be able to understand what was being built, visually see it or visually see where it would be, and understand exactly what was occurring there. It gave me a frame of reference, frankly. And so how could I make a decision about that, or vote on a contract, or even make a listen to someone on a personnel issue, because as a regent, I'm only have input on really one person. I'll correct that. Essentially only the Chancellor. However, the Board of Regents has to approve contracts. So no, we don't go hire the football coach. However, we ultimately have to approve his contract. So it's better that I have some sense of the people to a certain degree, not on a management standpoint, but anyway, I just like to have that sort of touch. I'm a visual and auditory person. But I guess one thing I would say to do is develop a respectful rapport with the people involved. And again, not to be granular, but there's basically a thought on my process of how do you bridge the business world that I come out of with the academic world or the academy. So I have visited every president, provost, and most of the deans. They've all been glad to inform me about what they do. There have been no exceptions. I've always had basically 3 questions or statements to them. Number one, when I would meet them, I would sincerely relate that I'm pretty sure that you're not looking for someone with a BBA in finance to tell you what to do. And however, I am a regent, so we're in this together. And what I would like to know from you is, if you were a regent, what would you do? What would you advise me to do as a regent on behalf of the university? Because here I am, I've been here 10 months. Many of these people have been here their entire careers. And so they've devoted their career to the school and to the students or to research. So they have an opinion, a learned opinion about what should occur or not occur. So just kind of guide me a little bit. Give me a little bit of guidance as to what you think a regent role should be and what I should do. And then I guess the third point that I would depart with is, what can I do to help you in your position to make Texas Tech better? What would you have me do? And specifically, don't give me just a broad generalization. I would like to know some specifics about what you see, what you would like to have done. And I don't take notes. I don't write them down. I don't go, to the petroleum engineer guy and go over and tell the president of the university, well, this guy, do you know he wants to do so-and-so? I do none of that. But I do just sort of get a reference point of what's going on in the university from that. I do believe, again, that you have to visually get a frame of reference. I don't think you can just go to a boardroom, meet, vote, not have any sense of it, and turn around and leave. I think there's more required from that. And I view that, I am a state official. So what does that mean? I believe a state official means that one is appointed to serve the people of the state of Texas. And so I believe in servant leadership. I'm there as a servant, and that's why I ask those questions. I want to know, specifically how and what needs to be done in that service. So I just think it gives me a better perspective on what's going on when I take it on that kind of approach. So I guess, the final point, there is like issues like board politics. We don't have a lot of that. So the question immediately came to mind for me was, well, we voted on something and it's always, not always, but generally almost always unanimous. Well, does that mean that the board gets along and everybody's united? It does. But the other perspective is, in regard to that, well, if the 9 regents are all just in agreement, then you're really not properly investigating and vetting the subject, because you're not going to get 9 people agreeing unanimously all the time on every subject for years. So are you really fulfilling your duties from a due diligence, from an asking questions standpoint? Does that mean you should be micromanaging the organization? No, but it does mean that you should take your job sincerely and seriously and understand governance. I've worked in professional corporations essentially all my life, so I do understand governance structures, and I honor those and believe in them. As the last thing I want to do is go run the football program or be a dean of the business school. I have zero interest in that, and but I do want to be able to enable the people that are empowered on a knowledgeable basis. So that's really pretty much where I've come from.
That's great. Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Chancellor Reeser?
Thank you very much. So this is about the 4th year I've done this. And somewhere along the way, I keep missing a meeting because I'm the one CEO that gets shoved up to this table where I'm supposed to tell you all, our bosses, here's how you do your job. And maybe it's that Aggie angle that I have haunting me. But so we kind of jokingly refer to this part as everything your CEO wants you as a new trustee or regent to know, but is afraid to confront you directly. So I get pushed up here and told this, and a lot of the material that I have here actually comes from my colleagues who are CEOs in our sector here, and particularly when we get to the end. So let's start with the big three. Big three. Your first duty: protect the institution. That is your absolute first duty. You should work in every way in the best interests of the institution, particularly when interests of various stakeholders begin to collide. It is the institution to which your loyalty is first. So that's big three, number one. Big three, number two, manage yourself. The one that president after president says, gosh, Mike, I'm so glad you said that, is inevitably when 9 people get together, you occasionally have tension. The fun part is when there's drama. You know who you are, you drama boards. And what I will tell you is, if you're a drama board and you ask your CEO to manage that, every minute your CEO spends managing the drama on the board is time stolen from your college or institution. It is the board's obligation to manage itself. So, biggie number 2. Biggie number 3, select and support your CEO. That is one of your big 3 obligations. And if you've done that properly, then the rest of what you do in terms of governing will be done correctly. There's a big danger sign when, as alpha types, as y'all had referred to, as alpha types, you've ascended to a governing board, either through an election or through governor's appointment or otherwise. You are used to being in charge. But if you find yourself tempted to do the CEO's job for her or him, chances are you've done poorly in terms of picking your CEO. Or you're overstepping your role as a governing member, one or the other. So select and support your CEO and know that, like has been said before, you have one employee. I'll give that a corollary. You actually have 2. You have one employee with whom you work constantly, and that's your CEO, but the other is your director of audits. Because under Protect the Institution, you should be paying close attention to things like internal audit, risk management, crisis response, fiscal responsibility, conflicts of interest. Those are all things that you oversee in a governing fashion to ensure you're protecting your organization. So the big 3, protect the organization first. That's where your loyalties are. Number 2, manage yourself. And then number 3, select and support your CEO. Your CEO is your professional hired manager on the ground. That is the person you've picked to be your proxy in managing the organization. What we're really talking about is the difference between governance and management. This is a huge and profound distinction. And one way I like to point to it is in your package, there's a matrix of these. The questions that you ask during a board meeting are going to indicate whether you're practicing governance or whether you're managing, and even worse, micromanaging. And these, I want to give you some of these questions. Now, I will tell you, the management, these are paired questions. So there's question A, which is management, and then question B, which would be more like governing. These question A's, the management questions, are literally questions that were given to me by fellow CEOs that have been asked of them in a board meeting. So here's the first one. How many gallons of gasoline does our police department use? I love that one. Now, I'll tell you what, if you're tempted to be asking or you consistently ask questions like that, then chances are you're practicing management or even micromanagement and not governance. Here's what it might sound like instead if you were practicing governance. Do we have an energy management plan? How do we measure its effectiveness? Gallons of gasoline, energy management. Here's another one. Why did our enrollment change 1%? That one. How about this instead? Governance might sound like, how are we doing on our enrollment management plan? Are we on target? What are some of the big pieces that are happening there? Big difference. Another, how much do we pay our registrar? Or fill in the blank, whatever. These are literal questions asked during board meetings. What could be a better way to approach it is, tell us about our compensation philosophy. How is it that we set our salaries? Are we competitive with the market? And what do we do to retain good talent? That's governance. as opposed to what do we pay individuals? How much did we spend on remodeling that laboratory? Now, we'll tell, particularly if it's a small project, that what might sound better is, how is it that we allocate our capital to the various needs of the institution, including salaries, capital assets, travel, and other expenses? How do we make those decisions? That would be a governing question. How many sections of cosmetology did we teach last year? That one. I'm not sure how, as a CEO, I would have reacted to that one in a board meeting, other than to say, here, read this big book full of all of our sections stuff. But what might be better is, how do we know that we're meeting the major workforce needs of our region? What plans do we have to fulfill the needs of our employers? One would be management, particularly micromanagement. The other would be governance. And then one more might be, how many millions of dollars did we receive in grants this year? This is one that often boards really get distracted by. How big was our grants department? When truly grants are only important if they are aligned with the goals of the institution. And so a governing question might be something like, how well were we able to employ grants to fulfill the primary goals of our institution this year? Do you see the nodding going on here? That always tells you that you've hit it there. So the notion is this: what your CEO wants you to know is they're there to serve the institution and be the liaison between you, the governing board, and the day-to-day management of the firm. And if you've chosen really well, and I know most of the 50 CEOs in the community college sector, and I can tell you they're a very strong group. If you've chosen well, those folks will manage that institution for you. Your role is to govern, to choose the CEO, support them, keep the drama of the board out of their office and in the boardroom where it belongs, and to focus on the big picture and allow your professional manager to manage. It's a danger sign if you find yourself tempted to do her or his job for them. Find out why. And then work closely to do that. So, you'll know your CEO is working effectively if this happens, that you see your CEO spending her or his time on only those things that a CEO could do. If you ask them to go do things that others can, then that's a danger sign. Danger sign number 2. Do you have your own office on campus? Why? You're a governing board. Why do you need an office on campus? That's one your CEO wants to ask you, but is afraid to ask. And then finally, I'll tell you this. If in every endeavor you do, you stay true to that notion of you are loyal to the institution first, the whole institution, not your particular campus that's nearby, not your region, the entire institution, and the well-being of that is what you're looking for first, then your role as a governing body will be a successful one.
All right, thanks, Chancellor Reeser. Well, I actually have a question, and I guess I'll ask Chancellor Reeser the question and maybe comments. There seems to be from what Ms. Johnson said, Mr. Lewis said, it may be a little bit of a confusion in my mind about what a CEO would expect. on the one hand, Ms. Johnson said, don't go to the lower level staff person to get specific information. And because just ask the CEO to deliver that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, Mr. Lewis said, for him to be an effective board member, he needs to get information. He needs to educate himself. And so he goes to a dean and asks these questions, not, to run the dean's, department or whatever, or college, but to be a more effective board member. What is your perspective, Chancellor?
So my perspective is that the governing board CEO model has held for so long because we know it works. And as soon as you begin to wire around that and the board begins to penetrate the organization outside the CEO's communication channel, then I would suggest you run the risk of developing different agendas, not being consistent with the overall main thrust of the organization. I think that doing that sort of thing has to be done in a very measured way and should never be done without the consent or a knowledge of the CEO. For example, in ours, from time to time, the way we work it at TSTC is Regents may have a question, and the truth is, I don't know the answer. And so I'll say, why don't you call our CFO, because he'll know that off the top of his head, and I'm sure that you'll be pleased with the answer that goes there. But I think the CEO is your hired guy or girl, and if you start wiring around him, then you'll destroy that check and balance that occurs with a governing board and a CEO.
But if the CEO is aware of discussions, hey, I'd love to talk to the provost of, whatever,
Yeah.
and so just to get an idea, then that's okay.
Yeah,
Just to educate the board.
I would concur, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might say that in regard to my outline, two things have occurred as a part of the process. One, when I do visit with a dean or provost, two things. One, I don't inquire, I'll be facetious, how many gallons of gas are consumed by the vehicular fleet.
I never imagined
No,
that
no,
question was asked by y'all.
However, I do ask them and generally what their responsibilities are and understand what they're doing. But that aside, I've never done an email to any of them that I didn't copy the Chancellor on. And then secondarily, because of my interest in the school, I've done another thing that's granular, but it's actually provided a forum for me to meet many of the university people. And that's participate in the commencement exercises. So I've gone to every commencement exercise. I've given the welcoming speech on behalf of the Regents, and I've shaken every hand of a student graduating as they've come across the stage, so to speak, which can be exhausting, especially if you have a bad back. However, it gives you sort of a sacrificial sense of what has occurred. You can see it in the students' eyes and the joy of that, and it kind of reinforces, why you're there. But it also has created a peer sort of without the edge relationship with all the university people. Not because of the commencement exercises, but because I have taken an interest in the school, the Chancellor has placed me on 3 different special committees as the Regent Liaison Task Force. 1 was obviously for the endowment, 2 was for institutional advancement, and 3 was finance. And he specifically asked me as the sole Regent rep to be there on those committee levels at the university level because of the relationship that I have with him, and he knows that I'm sincerely interested with a litmus test of what's in the best interest of the school.
So let me add on that if I could. If you consider the notion of the the chain of authority that exists in the governance model that we use in higher ed. The risk that often exists when you bypass the CEO is that eventually those who are being interacted with may seek or get in an unrequested way guidance from a board member that would more appropriately come from the CEO. The board is to hold the CEO accountable for all the operations of the institution. In the end, the buck stops at the CEO's desk, and the board's job is to hold that person accountable for everything. But as soon as the board begins to work around the CEO directly with members of management, then that accountability begins to break down, because now it's not the CEO who can be held accountable for what's going on, particularly if the board resorts to or gets to the point where they're actually issuing directives or making recommendations to management on how it ought to be. And so the whole accountability process will break down in that standpoint, and it can be a slippery slope.
Sure.
Well,
I guess we're kind of a little out of time. I think Mary's flashing a sign. Anyway, it was, I asked the question really to just throw open the issue, and I think, obviously you guys are going to be around, so please feel free to talk to the panelists later, because this is a really important issue that we face at the coordinating board, and so we have policies, and they are clearly the governance in the style of the governance model, but there are sort of times that as long as the commissioner knows that we're talking to staff members or whatever, then that's just fine, but he has to be really in the loop. But anyway, interesting issue. I hope you got something out of it, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and she's going to tell us
one thing real quick. I want to affirm what Michael's advice was regarding micromanaging and the relationship that a board member should have within the university. He's 100% correct on honoring that chain of command.
Thank you.